Hello everyone and welcome to Slash Film Daily for August 27th, 2018. On today's episode, we're going to talk about the latest film and TV news and read some responses in the mailbag. This is Slash Film Editor-in-Chief Peter Scirettais, and joining me on today's podcast is Slash Film Senior Writer Ben Pearsonand.
Hey, what's going on?
And writer Chris Evangelista.
Hello.
Usually on Monday, we do the water cooler. But Brad is out sick today. Jacob is on vacation because it is his birthday. I would wish him happy birthday, but I don't think he's listening to this. So I've done so personally. But yeah, expect a water cooler segment tomorrow on the show. But yeah, let's get into the mailbag before we get into the news. Last week on the show, you guys both weren't on, but we were talking about the worst movies we have seen this year so far. And since you guys weren't on, what are the worst movies you have seen this year? Ben, let's start with you.
I was listening to that episode where you guys were talking about that, and sort of like Brad, I feel like I've done a pretty decent job of avoiding a lot of just out-and-out terrible movies. But the ones that I've seen that sort of spring to mind are movies that are pretty bad, but more just sort of like in the eye-rolling category, like, give me a break with these freaking movies. Pacific Rim Uprising is one of those. Rampage is another one, and I would say The Cloverfield Paradox is another one of those as well. But there's one movie that I saw at Sundance that I really did not like at all, and it's called The Catcher Was a Spy. I think it's a Netflix original now, or Netflix bought it, and I believe it's on Netflix right now. I would not recommend watching it. It sounds really like a kind of a cool concept. It's Paul Rudd plays a former baseball player who becomes a spy during World War II, and it's based on a true story. And the true story sounds pretty incredible, but the movie is just so dull, and I cannot believe, thinking back on it, I cannot believe how they bungled such a cool concept and just turned it into something that is so lifeless on screen.
See, I'm glad that you saw something at Sundance that was not good, because I feel like every year I see at least one, if not a couple, movies that are bad. And Brad was just like, no, everything I saw at Sundance was good.
Yeah, I guess he had a really good. I mean, I had a great year at Sundance as well, but I think this one was the low the low thing on the totem pole for sure.
Yeah, Chris, what is the worst movies you've seen this year?
One I actually already talked about on this the podcast before, and it's Puppet Master: The Littlest Reich, which is just really bad. And I won't go into it too much because, like I said, I already talked about it. But I'll just preface by saying I love trash. I love trashy horror movies. I love stupid horror movies. But even for me, this was just pushing it. It's an inept, really poorly made film. And the fact that anyone is saying, like, I've seen people saying it's like a good movie, and no, absolutely not. I mean, taste is subjective, but no, this is nowhere close to being a good movie. What else? The Eli Roth Death Wish with Bruce Willis was just atrocious, just a terrible movie. And there's no reason for the movie to even exist here in this year, 2018. And the other is I've already gotten some guff for this on slashfilm.com, but I stand firm, and it is Jurassic World Fallen Kingdom, which the more I think about, the more angry I get at that movie for just existing at all. So those are the top ones for me.
Yeah, Ben, I'm surprised that one didn't make your list, because I remember your tweets about it. Like, you went off on a rant.
Yeah, I was not a fan of that one. I honestly just didn't have enough time to flip through my book of notes before we started recording this episode. If I would have gotten to that point, that movie definitely would have been on the list as well. I mean, I liked the last, 20 minutes of it, because it just sort of embraced its insanity, and it became the movie that I wanted it to be the whole time. But good God, the first, 3/4 of that movie is just, it's kind of painful.
Last week when I brought this up, I asked listeners to send in any suggestions that we may have missed, and we got a bunch of responses. I will leave them in the show notes, but I'll read through a couple of them really quickly. Brian from Kansas really hated Slender Man. Matt from Connecticut saw Superfly with his movie pass, and he calls it a steaming pile. amateurish, terribly written and acted, and the most ridiculous adolescent fantasy sex scene he's ever seen. Pure garbage. Chase D listed off a bunch of movies, but he's seen a lot of movies this year. He's seen 78 unique movies, which I think beats me. And the worst movie he's seen this year, he gave a 2 out of 10, and that was for Gotti, the MoviePass produced film. And Will M. Says this last weekend he saw Puppet Master, The Last Reich, the same movie that Chris just referenced, and it was absolutely brutal. And he's a fan of the director, so he was very disappointed. Sean from Missouri wrote in that the worst movie he had seen this year is Maze Runner 3, The Death Cure, and The Meg. I don't know. He had a lot to say about those. You can read all the comments in the show notes. I'm not going to read the emails on the air, but those were a couple movies that we did not mention. Have either of you seen any of the movies that were just listed?
No, I have not caught up with Maze Runner 3 yet. I have all three of those movies in a box set for some reason, even though I have not seen any of them. But Jacob Hall, the managing editor of Slash Film, talks very highly of the Maze Runner movies and director Wes Ball specifically. So I'm looking forward to diving into those. Who knows when I'll get around to that. But yeah, I'm interested to see if the third movie is indeed as bad as people say.
You know, I saw the first edition, the first movie in that trilogy, and I really liked it. So I'm curious to see what you say once you finally dive in. Chris, you hadn't seen any of these other movies like Gotti?
No, other than Puppet Master, I have not seen these. I probably won't see a lot of them. I am going to watch Gotti when it comes on Blu-ray just because I'm so curious to see if that's as bad as I hear it is. But like, I'm never going to see Superfly. I'm never going to watch Maze Runner 3, which is a film I forgot even came out this year. So, so I have not seen these.
It is funny with these like movie subscription services. Like I have the AMC A-list, and this weekend we were bored, and we were thinking about seeing another movie. I'd seen Searching on Friday night. I'll talk about that in the water cooler tomorrow. And I was going down the list of movies in AMC theaters that we could possibly see. And I was actually trying to convince Kitra, my girlfriend, to see Mile 22, even though it has horrible reviews. Just because it was like the one movie we have not seen that's like in AMC theaters. So I feel like, I don't know, I feel like these movie subscription services are sometimes they help you. Like maybe some people saw like, you know, a movie like Searching that probably otherwise wouldn't have. But on the other hand, when you're bored, you end up seeing shitty movies that you probably would have stayed away from. So, yeah. Anyways, let's dive into the news. Let's start off with a story that broke on, I believe Thursday, if not Friday. And we had an interview on Friday, so we didn't have a show on Friday. And that is that Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 3 is on hold in the wake of James Gunn's firing. Chris, you wrote this up for the site. What do we know?
So Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 3 was gearing up for pre-production, and there was a crew, and they were getting ready, and they got word to, you know, just basically go home. Disney told them they could go out and seek further employment elsewhere because as of now, Guardians 3 is on hold. And of course, this comes in the wake of James Gunn's firing over some joke tweets that were from a long time ago, and they got dredged up by some folks on the alt-right, I guess you would call them, and Disney was not having it. And, you know, since then there's been a bit of a backlash online with people urging Disney to rehire James Gunn. And there were conflicting reports that maybe Disney was considering that, but Disney's Alan Horn had a meeting with James Gunn where he basically just stuck to his guns, no pun intended, and said, I'm not hiring James Gunn back. And after that, you know, we all had assumed, well, I guess they're going to hire a new director, but now we don't know really what's happening at all. Right now it's on hold, and it's doubtful the film will, you know, come out. There was never an official release date announced, but we'd all assumed it would be sometime in 2020, but now that's looking very unlikely.
Yeah, on Friday, we had received word from a couple people in production. We were working on the story before, who was it? The Hollywood Reporter, I think, was the first to break it. And from what we had heard, the people in production were told it's not happening at all this year. So, if it's going to happen, it's going to happen next year. And that, to me, signals a huge change in direction because I think we had just assumed that they were going to use James Gunn's script, which I have been told by some people in production is the best of the trilogy thus far. But it seems like, if they're delaying it this far, they're probably going to look to hire a new director and maybe even, start from page one. And that would be really sad. Ben, do you have any thoughts on this?
I'm so sad about all of this, Peter. I think my thoughts are pretty well stated on this entire thing, and I am very curious to see now that my hope has been snatched away from me that they might consider rehiring Gunn, what they're going to do. Because, as we've talked about so many times, Guardians 3 was not just Guardians 3. It was the jumping off point for a whole other era of Marvel movies that sort of explored different corners of the universe. So are they going to completely come up with an entirely new plan? Like you're saying, Peter, it sounds like sort of a change in direction. Are they going to do something else entirely, or are they just going to find another avenue to get to that same destination? I don't know.
Yeah, and one thing I brought up on Twitter after the fact is during Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 2, they shot footage for this Guardians of the Galaxy Mission Breakout attraction that is at Disney California Adventure. Like, the reason they were able to get all the stars of that movie in footage in that ride was because they were able to shoot it alongside the film as part of the film shoot. And from what I understand, they were planning on shooting with Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 3, they were planning on shooting the footage needed for this big indoor roller coaster. They're building one of the biggest indoor roller coasters in the world in Epcot for a Guardians of the Galaxy roller coaster ride. And they were planning to film scenes there during the production of Volume 3, and now that Volume 3 is not happening anytime soon, and this roller coaster is, already being built, it's being constructed in Orlando, Florida as we speak. You can watch videos of the cranes and stuff building it as, online. I kind of wonder, how is Disney going to put that together now that there's no filming going on? And speaking of the theme parks, there was another story that came out over the weekend on a podcast, and this is that Disney is tweaking the Millennium Falcon ride at Star Wars Galaxy's Edge. Ben, you wrote it up for the site. What do we know?
Yeah, so Star Wars Galaxy's Edge is the new Star Wars themed theme park that's coming to, or land, I guess, that's coming to a lot of the Disney parks next year. And one of the attractions that we knew about was a Millennium Falcon ride where basically guests would go into the cockpit of the Millennium Falcon. There would be 6 people, or we just learned actually that there are going to be 6 people in an individual pod, and you're going to be looking out as if you're looking through sort of the main window of the cockpit of the Falcon, and each person has a specific job, a specific task to complete in terms of like how you actually fly around in the ship. And for instance, someone's piloting, someone's probably shooting, someone else is probably navigating in some way. Yeah, and like all of this interactivity is like a big part of the way that Disney is selling the concept of Galaxy's Edge as a park, right? Like we've talked a lot about this in previous episodes of the show, so I don't want to go too far into that. But on a recent episode of the Disney Dish podcast, theme park expert Jim Hill, who is a really reliable source of Disney park information and has been for a long, long time, explained that there are going to be 7 pods in operation at any one time. So that's 42 people who are going to be piloting the Millennium Falcon at once. And there's going to be about a 3.5-minute ride cycle for this attraction. So Peter, you sort of crunched the numbers on that, and you were saying that that means that the attraction can have a maximum of 840 riders per hour, which is about half of Pandora's Flight of Passage, or a quarter of the amount of a ride like Pirates of the Caribbean. So that probably means that lines for this thing are going to be really, really long, which, I mean, you probably could have guessed. It's a Millennium Falcon ride and a new Star Wars park. But the interesting thing about that is Disney is not in the business of creating experiences for people to complain about or be upset about. They want everybody to be really happy, so they'll come back and spend more, untold sums of money to come back and do the entire thing again. So they've encountered a little bit of a problem with the interactivity in this theme park ride. And as Jim Hill said on this podcast, initially they wanted real interaction, to the point where if the Millennium Falcon doesn't operate correctly, if one of the people in your pod doesn't do their task correctly, the ship might crash and the ride would be over. I think we have found out that is not actually the case, because riders can't technically crash the ship, because I mean, think about that. Like if you wait in line for 5 hours to ride on this thing, and then you're in there, and within the first 30 seconds, some idiot in the back row that you don't know, that's not a member of your party, does something wrong, and the whole thing crashes. That's exactly the kind of thing that I'm talking about that Disney does not want. So I think that every ride will be completed, but there still is a lot of, in the testing process for this, they've encountered a lot of problems with people being very frustrated instead of entertained with the interactivity aspects of this ride. So, Peter, I'm wondering, as somebody who pays a lot of attention to this stuff, is it possible to base a ride experience around this idea of true interactivity while also giving a good experience to all of the riders involved, or are those two things not possible to do at the same time?
I'm not sure, because, so far, there have been rides like Star Tours, which are completely not interactive in any way. There's randomized sequences, but you have no control. And then there's rides like Mission Space, where you're given like some knobs and things to do. It doesn't affect the ride experience in any way. So it's kind of like a fake interactivity. But what they're trying to do with this ride is, it is like you're playing the most expensive video game in the world. a moving video game. And I can just imagine being in line for, 3 hours to ride this ride. You're put in a cockpit in one of these pods with a family of 4, and I'm there with my girlfriend or a friend. I'm just a group of 2, so the 2 get stuck with the family of 4, and that family of 4 decides to, give Tommy, the 5-year-old, the reins to be the pilot of the Millennium Falcon.
Right.
And I can just imagine, getting stuck in that back seat, doing like one of those ancillary tasks that's not like even shooting or who knows what those other tasks are. And watching Tommy just destroy the Falcon for the 3.5 minutes. I don't know. It seems like it would be a frustrating experience. I'm wondering, I don't know. What do you think?
Yeah, I mean, it sounds like, Jim Hill says the worry right now is they've delivered an amazing ride experience for 10% of the guests, and the other 90% are going to have, whether it's tech issues or they're going to be frustrated with the other people in the cabin who aren't holding up their end. There's some tweaking going on. So it sounds like Disney is trying to find a solution to this problem. I'm not sure what that is. And even, I guess along with all of this stuff, imagine that scenario you're just talking about, Peter, where Tommy just crashes the Falcon or basically ruins the mission or whatever. As we've written about before, what happens on your flight is actually going to have ripple effects throughout your experience at the park, because that's part of what Disney is doing, is tying all this stuff in together. So if you do a great job or whatever, maybe the rest of your day might go differently than if you crash into another ship. Maybe like theoretically the pilot of that ship could come chasing after you, at a totally different time in a totally different section of the park. That's the level of interactivity that they're trying to go after here. So it raises the stakes basically for every time you do something like this that is supposed to have those ripple effects. It makes it more important than just going on a ride, because it actually has a lasting impact throughout the entirety of your trip at Disneyland. So it's going to be a really interesting challenge for them to overcome this level of frustration that they're seeing in these testing phases right now.
Yeah, I'm not sure if it was said at Celebration or if this was just a rumor, but I think it was said that like you're trying to smuggle some kind of cargo to somewhere in the Falcon, obviously, and if you make it there in one piece, whatever, you get some credits that you could actually credits that you could actually spend in the land in some way. So, if Tommy screws that up for me, I'm going to be pissed. But I'm also going to be pissed if my job, if I have like very little to do and Tommy's the one flying the thing. I don't know. And it also seems like in the end, this probably is going to get revamped and revamped and revamped to the point where, the jobs are going to be so simple and easy to do, where it's going to be like at one point in time, someone has to, press a button to launch a missile. And that's like that person's job for the entire ride. I don't know. I feel like that's not the interactive experience that they're promising, but we'll have to see. But this is not a theme park podcast, so we should move on and talk about Netflix, who, Ben, you are still one of these people who subscribes to their in-the-mail movie subscription service. You're one of, 3 million people that still subscribe to this. Chris, you wrote up a piece on the site about this and the plans for the future. Tell us about it.
So Variety has an interview with what's his name, Ted Sarandos, the chief content officer at Netflix, and he confirmed that about 3 million people still subscribe to Netflix's DVD service, the physical DVDs, which is it's under the banner DVD.com right now, but it's still a Netflix company. And that seems to be surprising a lot of people, because in this day and age, when people think of Netflix, they think of it as a streaming service, even though when Netflix launched, it was originally all about physical media. It was all about mailing you DVDs that you rented online. And, while 3 million seems like a pretty healthy number, and it brings in about $53 million to the company as of now, Netflix also doesn't think it's sustainable, because subscriptions are dropping off substantially over the year. So if this trend continues, Netflix expects to be done with DVDs by 2022. So if you're still renting them, be prepared for the future, I guess.
Oh, no.
Yeah, Ben, what are you going to be doing to prepare for the DVD-less future?
I don't know. I hope we're still around in 2022, Peter.
I almost wonder what effect, Netflix, the de-escalation of this DVD service has had on like the U.S. Postal Service, because I remember at one point there was like some kind of statistic out there that was like 1 out of every 4 thing mailed is a Netflix DVD. That was probably at the peak of the Netflix's DVD service. Now that that's going away, yeah. So Ben, you're gonna have to find another way. You're gonna have to join us in the 21st century streaming and buying.
Yeah, I think you're probably right. I'm gonna have to subscribe to those streaming services that I've been holding off for a long time.
You know what? We should take this opportunity because a lot of people are surprised that there are 3 million people still subscribed to this. So Ben, I know you've said this in the past, but why are you still subscribed to this physical media, subscription service?
Well, I feel like that's one of the few places that actually has. I mean, it's great having the instantaneousness of being able to watch something at the click of a button, but I feel like a lot of stuff just still has not been digitized and is not in the libraries of any of these streaming services. And something like Filmstruck is a great place for older films, and I watch TCM here and there, Turner Classic Movies on cable all the time, but still there are movies that I just want to seek, old classics and stuff that are not in those rotations, and I've found that the Netflix DVD plan is one of the few places left where I can get them easily, and I don't have to worry about paying really extra fees. It's all still going to Netflix. It's all, lumped into one sum that I pay every month for the streaming service as well as the DVD plan. So it was just an easy way for me to still seek out stuff that I hadn't had a chance to see yet.
Yeah, and Netflix used to have a lot of content out there, but it seems more and more they're going for their original content, not licensing big Hollywood movies and back catalogs anymore. So I think one of these days you're going to have to either subscribe to a variety of different services, like Disney streaming service, have access to their entire back catalog, or just join. Some of these old movies aren't available on to rent on iTunes or anything like that.
They might be. I've never really gotten into iTunes as a movie watching platform, so I may have to explore that in 2022 when my entire world comes crashing down around me.
Speaking of the Disney streaming service, we have now found out it has an official name, and we have an idea of how much it will cost. Chris, tell us about it.
So according to Bob Iger, the Disney CEO, the name as of now for Disney's big streaming service is Disney Play, which is fine, I guess, nothing that exciting. And it's probably going to cost around $6, which is pretty damn low considering the cost of other streaming services. I mean, the lowest I think Netflix gets is like $8, and I think like Shudder is like $10. So this is pretty low for, as far as streaming services go. But I guess, Netflix has Disney has all the money in the world, so they can probably afford this. But I also feel like, as is the case with most streaming services, it'll start low, and then after a year, they'll probably jack up the price. But as of now, that's what they're thinking. It'll be around $6 to start.
That makes me wonder if there's going to be some kind of tiers. Like, will that tier include advertising that you can't skip or something? A la Hulu? Or, I don't know. That seems very low. I do not like the name at all. The name sounds like, Disney's next video game system. A la, what was that thing with the toy box? Now I'm even blanking on the name of those figures.
Disney Quest?
Disney Infinity.
Oh, Disney Infinity, yeah.
Yeah, wow. I don't know. I really like the name that we have suggested on the podcast in the past, the Disney Vault, which I feel like has a legacy in the Disney company. Ben, do you have any thoughts on this? At $6, is that enough? Is that low enough to get you to subscribe?
Yeah, I think I'll do that for $6. Yeah, I mean, I totally agree with Chris. I think that's definitely a starting price that's going to increase over time. But for sure, yeah, I was expecting something closer to, I don't know, $15, considering they're going to have like original Star Wars shows and maybe some Marvel content, and not to mention the access to their entire back catalog. I mean, that sounds like it's going to be a lot of content, not just scratching the surface kind of stuff. And there's a lot of good stuff that Disney has produced. I mean, I know people like to give them flack because they're like one of the biggest like entertainment conglomerates in the world. But looking at the sheer quality of a lot of their stuff, $6 seems like a pretty good deal for that.
Yeah, we still have no idea if the Fox content, the legacy content, will end up on that streaming service or not. Okay, let's move on and let's talk about Big Trouble in Little China, which is getting rebooted, remade, sequelized. I don't know. Dwayne Johnson says that it is not a remake. Ben, what do we know?
Yeah, so John Carpenter's 1986 comedy Big Trouble in Little China was back in 2015. We heard that Dwayne Johnson was going to be starring in a remake of that movie, and now 3 years later, we hadn't really heard much about it in between, now 2015 and now. But producer Hiram Garcia, I think that's how you pronounce his name. I apologize if that's wrong. Is one of the producers on the new movie. He's the leader of Dwayne Johnson's production company, and he, in a new interview with Collider, said there's a lot of things going on with that movie. We're in the process of developing that, and let me tell you, the idea is not to actually remake Big Trouble in Little China. You can't remake a classic like that. So what we're planning to do is we're going to continue the story. We're going to continue the universe of Big Trouble in Little China. Everything that happened in the original exists and is standalone, and I think there's only one person that could ever play Jack Burton, so Dwayne would never try and play that character. So we're just having a lot of fun. We're in a great space with the story that we've cracked. No remake, it's a continuation, and we're deep into development on that as well. So, and they also said, I think you'll start hearing some things about that probably soon. So this right there, along with Jumanji: Welcome to the Jungle, is sort of the next project where Dwayne Johnson is continuing a story that began in a beloved movie. And it sounds like it's leaving the door open for Kurt Russell to theoretically come back to reprise his role as Jack Burton in maybe a cameo. I don't know if that's really in the cards, but it sounds like they're definitely hoping for that. You know, reading between the lines, it sounds like they would love for that to happen. So I don't know, Chris, I know you're a big John Carpenter fan. What do you think about this idea? I assume you think it's better that they're not remaking it, but what do you think about the idea of a sequel?
Yeah, a remake would be a very bad idea, but if they do turn this into a sequel and they do get Kurt Russell to come back, I might be interested. At the same time, you know, what made Big Trouble in Little China so great was, you know, I mean, a lot of stuff, but it was also John Carpenter, and he's not going to be directing whatever this is. So it's kind of hard to get too excited about it. But I don't know, if it is a sequel, and if they do get Kurt Russell back, I would definitely be a lot more optimistic about it than, you know, just a straight up remake.
See, I'm a little cynical about this. Like, I feel like you hear this talk all the time, like, you know, we're not doing a remake. It takes place in the same universe. It's kind of a sequel. And then it ends up being like, you know, Jumanji: Welcome to the Jungle, which I think was the best possible scenario for that movie. Like, it ended up being a good movie, but it's not really a sequel. You know, there's a little bit of a nod to Robin Williams in the first movie, but aside from that, it could have been its own standalone movie. And I feel like a lot of people try to paint these things as like sequels when they're really reboots set in the same universe. I don't know. I feel like we need to come up with good terminology that everybody can agree on, because no one can seem to agree on reboot, sequel, remake, legacy equal. You know, we have all these terminologies, and I feel like we're just playing semantics at some point.
One more thing I wanted to say is for people who are wondering what a continuation might actually be about, John Carpenter actually co-wrote a Big Trouble in Little China sequel comic book that debuted last year, and I have the synopsis of that in the article at Flash Film, so I'll send you to that, dear listeners who are interested in this. Go check out the article, and you can read the synopsis and maybe get an idea of what they could theoretically potentially use as a jumping off point for this movie.
Another news story that broke while we were away was that J.J. Abrams is going to reunite with one of his lost stars in Star Wars Episode 9. Chris, you wrote this up for the site. What do we know?
So Dominic Monaghan, who was on Lost and, of course, was in the Lord of the Rings films, plural, is joining Episode 9 as... We don't know. It's a mystery, which means everyone will now theorize he's related to Rey in some way, because that's apparently the only thing people can think of when someone is cast in one of these movies. So feel free to...
Chris, that's ridiculous. He's like 40 years old. Daisy Ridley is supposed to be like in her late 20s, early 30s. I don't think that's possible.
He can be like her cousin, Rey's cousin, or something like that. So, yeah, feel free to speculate wildly about who Dominic Monaghan is playing. I'm just going to go out on a limb and say his role is not going to be huge, because, you know, this casting is coming while they've already started shooting, and they just announced this now. So I'm guessing it's going to be like a smallish part, maybe close to like Benicio del Toro in The Last Jedi, where he was in, you know, a very small fraction of the film, but we shall see.
I would probably agree with that. They did that big press release, and if he was in negotiations back then, they would have included it back then. This seems like it's probably a more minor role. I could see him as kind of like, a guy in like the Resistance, or I don't know. I can't imagine him as a bad guy. Ben, you're a fan of Lost. Could Dominic Monaghan be part of the First Order?
I am really holding out hope that he's playing Constable Zuvio, Peter. I'm really hoping that we get a full-on Zuvio renaissance here, and that character finally gets the due that he's long deserved.
Okay, let's move on to our next story, and that is that the Russo brothers have found the film that they're going to direct after Avengers 4. Ben, you wrote this for the site. What do we know?
Yeah, it's called Cherry, and we know that Anthony and Joe Russo have Avengers 4 coming up next summer, but after that, I believe they've said that they're done with Marvel, at least for the time being. There's always the chance that they could get lured back, Michael Bay to Transformers style, where, they could just back up a dump truck of money and bring them back eventually. But yeah, we know that their next project is called Cherry, and it is based on a book by Nico Walker, and the novel tells a story that really closely lines up with the events that actually happened to the author. And the protagonist in this book is an army medic who comes back from the Iraq War with a really, really intense case of undiagnosed PTSD, and he starts robbing banks to sort of cope with that whole situation. So the book has been called Jesus' Son Meets Reservoir Dogs in terms of like the tone of it, and it's called described as a breakneck-paced debut novel about love, war, bank robberies, and heroin. So this sounds like a total 180 from the behemoth of a production that Avengers 4 is, and might signal the kinds of smaller movies that the Russos may want to make moving forward. Interestingly, their new production company / studio, it's called the Agbo, AGBO, ended up beating out a bunch of companies like Sony and Endeavor Content and Warner Brothers for the rights to this. Warner Brothers actually had James Franco slated to direct, and John Polano, the writer of the Jake Gyllenhaal movie Stronger, set to write the script, but the Russo brothers company bid $1 million and ended up winning out in the end. So they're very passionate about this story. They grew up in Cleveland, Ohio, which is near where Nico Walker, the author, grew up. And Deadline said that the Russo brothers have also lost friends to the opioid crisis, and they wanted to shine a spotlight on that particular issue. So it sounds like this movie will give them the opportunity to do that.
Very interesting. Okay, that does it for today's Slash Film Daily. Chris, where can we find more of your work online?
I'm at slashfilm.com, and I'm on Twitter at CEvangelista413.
Ben, where can I find you?
You can find me at slashfilm.com as well. I am on Twitter at Ben Pears.
You can find me at slashfilm on all social media. You can find all the stories we talked about today on slashfilm.com and linked in the show notes. This podcast, Slash Film Daily, is published every weekday on iTunes, Google Play, Overcast, Spotify, all the popular podcast apps, as well as slashfilm.com. And you can feel free to send us your feedback, questions, comments, concerns to Peter at slashfilm.com. Please leave your name and general geographic location in the email in case we mention your letter on the air like we did today in the mailbag. Please go rate and review this podcast in iTunes. Tell your friends, spread the word, and we'll see you tomorrow.